There is a particular kind of pause that shows up when something matters. It does not feel like confusion, and it does not feel like fear in the obvious sense. It feels more like standing still while something inside leans forward. You might recognize it because nothing around you has changed, yet something within you has shifted. The next step is visible, but it does not feel light. It carries a sense of consequence, as though taking it would quietly alter how you see yourself or how you move through the world. That weight is often what people mean when they say the step feels too big, but size is not really the issue. Meaning is. Have you ever noticed how certain decisions linger longer than others even when they seem simple on paper? You can outline them. You can explain them to someone else. You might even give good advice about them if they belong to another person. Yet when it is time to move, something slows you down. That hesitation is not always resistance. Sometimes it is recognition. Recognition that once you act, there will be no pretending you did not know. Awareness has a way of changing the stakes. After awareness, inaction starts to feel heavier than action, even if action still feels uncomfortable. Think back to a moment when you delayed something that mattered, not because you were incapable, but because you sensed it would change things. Once done, it would rearrange priorities or expectations. It might require consistency instead of inspiration. It might require you to stop negotiating with yourself. Steps like that do not just ask for effort. They ask for agreement. Agreement with a new standard. Agreement with a version of life that does not allow the same excuses to keep passing as reasonable. Many people assume the right step will feel calm and obvious. That assumption creates unnecessary confusion. The steps that actually grow a life often feel disruptive before they feel right. They introduce friction into routines that have already been mastered. Familiar rhythms get challenged, and the body reacts before the mind can explain why. This reaction often gets mislabeled as fear, when it is really the nervous system encountering unfamiliar territory. Familiarity feels safe, even when it is limiting. Unfamiliar growth can feel threatening, even when it is aligned. Have you ever caught yourself saying you will move once things settle down, only to realize that life rarely settles on its own? It settles when decisions are made. Until then, the mind stays busy managing possibilities instead of engaging reality. One of the more subtle ways avoidance shows up is through practicality. It sounds responsible. It asks for more information. It asks for better timing. It asks for conditions to improve. None of those requests are wrong on their own, but together they can quietly protect comfort while calling it wisdom. Comfort has value, but it does not build capacity. It preserves what already exists. When a step feels overwhelming, it is often because the mind is trying to carry the entire future at once. It wants certainty before commitment. It wants proof before participation. The problem is that proof rarely appears in advance. It appears in motion. This is where people get stuck, not because they lack courage, but because they misunderstand sequence. They expect clarity to come first. In reality, clarity tends to follow engagement. Movement reveals information that thinking alone cannot access. Remember a time when something felt impossible until you started, and then it turned out to be manageable once you were inside it. The difficulty did not disappear, but it became specific instead of imagined. Specific problems can be solved. Imagined problems multiply. This is why action often reduces anxiety even when it increases effort. Anxiety thrives in uncertainty. Effort thrives on structure. Taking a step converts vague dread into tangible work. What would happen if instead of trying to complete the step, the only goal was to make contact with it? Contact does not require perfection. It requires honesty. It might look like beginning without finishing, asking without resolving, or starting without announcing. Contact tells the body that movement is possible and that control has not been lost. That signal alone can change how the step feels. The size does not change, but the relationship to it does. There is a difference between preparation and postponement, and the line between them can be difficult to see from the inside. Preparation builds skill. Postponement protects identity. One asks, "What do I need to learn?" The other asks, "How can I avoid being seen in transition?" Growth exposes learning curves, and learning curves can feel vulnerable, especially for people who value competence. Staying where you already know how to perform well can feel safer than stepping into a space where you might look uncertain for a while. Have you noticed how often people prefer to stay capable rather than become capable? Staying capable means operating only in areas already mastered. Becoming capable means tolerating a period of not knowing. That period can feel like loss even though it is actually expansion. The discomfort is not punishment. It is adjustment. Muscles ache when they are being used differently. The ache does not mean damage. It means adaptation. When the step feels too big, it is worth asking what kind of big it is. Is it big because it will take time? Is it big because it requires learning something new? Is it big because it involves being seen before everything is polished? Each of these carries a different weight, and each requires a different response. Treating them all the same creates confusion. Naming the real challenge often reduces the emotional load because it restores a sense of agency. Once named, a challenge can be approached instead of avoided. Think about a moment in your past when you surprised yourself by doing something you did not feel ready for. At the time, there may have been doubt or hesitation, but afterward, there was often a quieter feeling, not excitement, but steadiness. That steadiness comes from integrity. Integrity is the alignment between what you know and what you do. When actions match internal truth, internal noise decreases. When actions avoid internal truth, the noise persists, even if everything looks fine from the outside. Avoidance does not eliminate discomfort, it relocates it. Instead of effort, the cost becomes mental loops, unfinished thoughts, and a low-level restlessness that never quite settles. Taking a step converts that diffused discomfort into effort with an endpoint. Effort ends. Mental loops rarely do until interrupted by action. This is why people often feel relief after doing something difficult, even if the difficulty itself remains. Have you ever noticed how the idea of a task can feel heavier than the task itself? That weight often comes from added expectations. The mind says that if you start, you must finish. If you begin, you must do it perfectly. If you take this step, everything else must change immediately. None of that is actually required. The only real requirement is engagement. Engagement opens the door to adjustment. Adjustment allows growth to become sustainable instead of overwhelming. Growth rarely demands intensity, it demands consistency. Consistency is easier to maintain when steps are sized to be repeatable rather than impressive. Impressive efforts burn bright and fade quickly. Repeatable efforts compound quietly. This is why simplifying the next action can be powerful. Simplification is not lowering the bar, it is removing unnecessary friction so movement becomes possible. What if the step feels too big because it will change what you expect from yourself going forward? That kind of change can feel unsettling. Expectations shape behavior. Raising them requires relinquishing old allowances. This is where many people get stuck, not because they doubt their ability, but because they sense the step will demand a different relationship with discipline or follow-through. Commitment turns desire into standard, and standards have consequences. There is a reason people keep dreams vague. Vagueness allows hope without accountability. Specificity demands decisions. Once a desire becomes specific, procrastination starts to feel dishonest. That discomfort often gets misinterpreted as fear of failure, but it can also be fear of success. Success would require consistency, visibility, or responsibility that cannot be easily undone. Consider this question carefully. If the outcome were guaranteed, what would you do differently today? The answer usually comes quickly. That answer is not fantasy. It is clarity stripped of uncertainty. The only thing standing between the present and that action is the willingness to move without guarantees. That willingness is a skill. Like any skill, it develops through use. Courage is often misunderstood as the absence of fear. In practice, it looks more like the ability to let fear speak without letting it decide. Fear raises concerns. Some of those concerns are useful. Others are protective habits learned over time. Listening without obeying requires discernment. Discernment grows through experience, not avoidance. Have you ever noticed how comfort can quietly become a ceiling? Nothing feels wrong, yet nothing feels expansive either. Life works, but it does not stretch. That stretch is where growth lives. Stretching feels uncomfortable by nature. Muscles do not grow in ease. Minds do not expand in certainty. Lives do not change in sameness. The presence of discomfort does not mean something is off. Sometimes it means something is alive. Gratitude and growth are not opposites. Gratitude appreciates what exists. Growth asks whether what exists is still the right container. Staying grateful does not require staying small. Outgrowing a situation does not invalidate what it provided. It simply acknowledges that seasons change. Resisting that change often costs more energy than embracing it. When a step feels too big, it often helps to return to evidence rather than motivation. Motivation fluctuates. Evidence accumulates. Evidence might be as small as having shown up once when you did not feel like it, or having taken a risk before and survived. Those moments matter. They form a quiet record of resilience that the mind often forgets when facing something new. Confidence is not a starting tool. It is a result. Waiting for confidence delays the process that produces it. This is why people who move before they feel ready often appear more confident over time. They are not fearless. They are practiced. Practice builds familiarity. Familiarity reduces emotional charge. The body learns faster than the mind. Once the body experiences that movement does not equal danger, the mind begins to relax its grip. This is why small, consistent actions are so effective. They retrain the nervous system without overwhelming it. Large, sporadic efforts can reinforce fear because they keep the body in a cycle of intensity and collapse. What if the next step is not asking for a leap, but for ownership? Ownership is quieter than ambition. It is less glamorous, but more powerful. Ownership means taking responsibility for the direction of your life, even when circumstances are not ideal. It means choosing participation over commentary. Once ownership is assumed, excuses lose their appeal. There is no requirement to see the entire path. Most paths reveal themselves only after movement begins. Demanding full visibility before acting misunderstands how growth unfolds. Clarity expands as capacity expands. Capacity expands through use. This sequence cannot be reversed without friction. Have you ever noticed how hindsight makes past challenges look simpler than they felt at the time? That does not mean they were easy. It means you changed. Growth alters perception. What once felt threatening becomes familiar. What once required courage becomes routine. That is not because life gets easier, but because you become steadier. The step that feels too big today may one day feel inevitable. Not because it was obvious, but because once taken, it becomes part of your story. Stories shape identity. Identity influences future decisions. Each time you move through uncertainty with integrity, you make the next uncertain step slightly easier to approach. This is not about proving anything to anyone else. It is about staying in alignment with what you already know. Ignoring that knowledge does not remove it. It waits. It resurfaces, often louder than before. Acting on it quiets the internal noise, even when the external work remains challenging. What if the step exists not to intimidate, but to initiate? Initiation is rarely comfortable. It marks the end of one phase and the beginning of another. Endings can feel heavy even when they are necessary. Beginnings can feel awkward even when they are right. Both can exist at the same time. So here is the quiet invitation hidden inside the discomfort. Not to rush, not to force, not to wait for certainty. Simply to notice what the step is asking for right now, in this moment, not in the imagined future. Is it asking for action or for honesty? Is it asking for commitment or for clarity? Is it asking for courage or for simplification? Because once you see that, the step often changes shape. It stops looking like a mountain and starts looking like a direction. And directions are meant to be followed one step at a time. The question that remains is not whether you are capable. It is whether you are willing to move while the answer is still unfolding.